Yo, it's Mel from Rap Rankings. To hear the full episode this clip comes from and all the other episodes, stop by raprankings.com or search Rap Rankings on your favorite podcast platform. Rap Rankings audience, our resident hip-hop historian, proud Bostonian, de facto 80s specialist has returned. You've spotted him on You Discover Music, NPR, Mass Appeal, Complex, and OK Player. He's an author. His first book, The Book of Dart, is available now, and his upcoming book, Instead We Became Evil, A Tale of Survival and Perseverance, will be available August 9th. You know him, you love him, or you surely at the very least respect him. Ladies and gentlemen, Dart Adams.
What up, what up? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
The ruler's back.
The rule is back, you know?
Stop lying.
Yeah, this is we talked briefly before we started recording, but yeah, this should be fun. I always enjoy these 80s albums experiences because I feel like I learn more than pretty much any other era, because being born in the 90s, I remember a little bit of it. Coming of age really in the 2000s, I feel much more versed. And being an adult for pretty much since the 2010s, I feel like I'm walking right in tandem with everything that's been developing in a hip hop sense. So this is the one time on the show where I get to kind of just soak in things. So this is always fun for me. But yeah, we're right here up top with this track one, Treat Her Like a Prostitute. If I'm not mistaken, this is produced by Slick Rick himself.
Yes, it is. Slick Rick and Vance Wright.
Got it. And Vance Wright. Okay. And yeah, I mean, look, folks, if you're new to the show, we're going to get into some ratings. We have a rating system. If you're unfamiliar, Dart's familiar, so I'm not going to bore him with the details. But raprankings.com, go to the FAQ section, whole rating system explained right there. You know, as custom dictates, you know, Dart, if you want us to go first with our ratings, if you want to go first with the rating, however you want to do it, we can do it.
All right, so first I need to lay down foundation.
Absolutely. Okay.
So here's the thing. We're talking about the very first song on the album, Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute. Mm-hmm. When it starts, the first thing he says is, here's an oldie but goodie, hit it. Now, The album was released, and this is fun. The album was released. If you go on Wikipedia, it says the album was released on, I believe it says November 1st, 1988, which is patently wrong. Now, how do I know this? Because I've been researching this for years, and I was brought on by Urban Legends at one point a couple years ago, and they were finishing a project. The project they were finishing was Slick Rick's this album, a package for Slick Rick's The Great Adventures of Slick Rick, because again, I believe it was 2018. So they were doing a 30th anniversary package, and I was talking to the woman who was in charge at the time, and I'm like, wait, when are you releasing this? And she said, we're releasing it in November. I was like, why are you releasing it in November? She was like, because that's when the album came out. I was like, no, it didn't.
Wow.
And this starts a hilarious back and forth. At the time, I'm working with them because I'm going to be doing liner notes for, they would put out a box set for Eric B. and Rakim, all their albums on vinyl. So I'm doing a liner notes for their second album, which is Follow the Leader. I wrote incredible liner notes for them. It should be in a future book. Neither here nor there. I'm like, the album did not come out in November, especially in early November. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, let me explain something to you. And I'm going to explain this to you. Follow for now. So the lead single for this album, Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, was a B-side. A B-side to a single called Teenage Love. Now, when you go on Wikipedia, it says Teenage Love was released in November 1988. No, the fuck, it wasn't.
Okay.
I'm going to walk you all through this. As somebody who's old as fuck, lived through this, was outside in 1988, and is frustrated as hell because I do all this research and I show it to people. I'm like, hey, look, and they pay no attention.
Right.
Okay. So, here's a funny thing. Again, Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute is the lead single. And at the top of the album, he says, here's an oldie but goodie, hit it. The reason he says that is because for those of you that aren't aware, Slick Rick was not his original MC name. His original MC name was MC Ricky D. Now, why wasn't he Slick Rick from the jump? Why? Because when he was a young teenager going to high school with the other members of the Kango crew, which is a MC crew, an early rap crew that is often cited and talked about like they were like one of the greatest rap groups of all time. In reality, the Kango crew never had recorded a single, a song, anything. You cannot find a single recorded performance by the Kango crew. Wow. You can't find a performance at a nightclub. You can't find a battle. You can't find demos. None of it exists. Because the Kango crew existed as a high school rap group. How do so many people know about the Kango crew? Why? Because so many famous people in rap, so many iconic people in rap, so many legends went to high school with them or lived in that neighborhood and saw them do their shows and their routines live.
Got it. Okay.
Right, so it's a neighborhood crew. It's not so much a rap crew in the traditional sense as we've come to know them.
Well, but think about the neighborhood, you know?
Right.
So like that's what made them iconic. Everybody who was everybody saw the Kango crew, went to high school with the Kango crew, saw them perform on the street and do their routines and knew their routines. But they never recorded. They never have a demo. There's no single. There's no battle. You won't find any audio of the Kango crew anywhere. Like the difference is like with Kid Wizard Rakim, you can find a whole bunch of live performances he did before he even, did Check Out My Melody in '86. So it's a different. Now, moreover, from the Kango crew, in the Kango crew, you had himself as dude Omega the Heartbreaker, and of course Dana Dane. Everybody in the group had an accent except for Dana Dane, who imitated Slick Rick's type of accent because he didn't want to be the odd man out in the crew. Everybody had some type of accent, so he had an accent. He faked it, right? Bam. So MC Ricky D, around 1985, 84, going into 85, 84, he starts encountering Dougie Fresh at all these talent shows. Him and Dougie Fresh go into all these talent shows, and then ultimately Dougie Fresh is just like, yo, why don't we just team up? We like do routines and shit together. And Dougie Fresh is the big draw. He's the human beatbox. Later he gets a crew called, the Get Fresh crew. Him, Chill Will, Barry B, 2 DJs. And on top of that, he has his boy, MC Ricky D, who he brings in. And they record 2 singles that tear the world apart, Lottie Dottie and The Show. Now, while they're doing Lottie Dottie and The Show between 1985 and 1986, there's another routine that they have, which is a routine that, MC Ricky D came up with from the old days that he came up with his crew, the Kango crew. It's called Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute. So at nightclubs and at different performances, Dougie Fresh would bring out MC Ricky D, and they'd perform this raunchy routine, Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, where he would beatbox and back him up, doing the special effects and, voices, and Ricky D would, do the routine. Now, why wasn't he called Slick Rick back then? Because back in the early to mid 80s, Slick Rick was the nickname for one of the biggest stars in black music. This dude named Rick James. I'm Rick James, bitch.
Right. Okay.
So if you looked in like Billboard, Cashbox, or Right On, or Black Beat, they called him Slick Rick.
I did not know that. Wow.
To the point where if you listen to the song Square Biz, when Tina Marie starts rapping, the dude she's rapping with, she calls him Slick Rick. Don't be too slick, because it is also hearkening back to Rick James. Okay, now, moreover, when Dougie Fresh gets his deal, him and the Get Fresh crew, they signed with Dania Reality, which is the label that he's on. And they put out these albums, Oh My God, and then The World's Great, and then they put out another album. And then they put out, Greatest Entertainer in 88 when he blows up. 3 albums, back to back to back. Dougie Fresh is out of here. He's gone. So Slick Rick, he kind of wants to go solo. But now, remember when I told you that they did this routine at like clubs and nightclubs and all the other venues? Well, the beauty about rap back in the days is that people would record your performances. And what happened is a lot of people recorded different live performances of Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, and they played them on the air.
Wow, on the radio.
On the radio. So between 1985 and 1987, you can, in the tri-state area, different people, different hip-hop fans, kids recorded different versions of Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute and had it and knew the routine for like between a year and 18 months. And if you ask people, like, I recorded it in late 85. I recorded it in 86. I got mine in 87. So it spread in New York rap radio. And again, rap radio was played at night. Right. You know, so it wasn't like they're playing this song when the sun's up. Sometimes this shit's getting played 10 at night, 11 at night, midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning. So you can get away with it. So that's why at the beginning he says, here's an oldie but goodie, hit it. Now, more so to when it was released. This brings us to Run DMC. Run DMC released a movie called Tougher Than Leather. Tougher Than Leather was released in mid-September 1988. Okay? You're following me. Mid-September 1988. Now, again, Dougie Fresh Def Jam releases the single Teenage Love / Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute. But when you go to get the single in the plastic, on vinyl, on 12-inch, you can go to Discogs, you can see it for yourself. They still have the sticker up, 10 tap. It says the song Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute is featured in the film Tougher Than Leather. Mm-hmm. So if you have a sticker saying that you can find this song, oh, and not only that, they have the album version and they have the version that Slick Rick performs in the damn movie. Both available on this single, the B-side. And if you're going to do that, then you know what that means? The single was out before the film or at the same, or dropped just when they knew the film was hitting theaters. So that means that this single could not have been released in November. It had to be released in September.
Right. Okay.
September. Right? Okay.
So Wikipedia, wrong again. Now, moreover, Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, the single, the B-side, the album version. This is important because it's the first time that you're hearing this song produced. A DJ is scratching. There's an actual beat. It's just Rick. The focus is on him. Now, for anybody who doesn't really understand how rap worked back in the day, the MCs weren't always the focus of the group. Matter of fact, people used to come for the DJ or somebody else. And then the MC kind of had to trick you. Hey, I'm the MC. Gotcha. Gotcha, bitch.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So, again, Slick Rick, at the time, MC Ricky D, he wasn't even really a part of the Get Fresh crew. It was the Get Fresh, Dougie Fresh, the Get Fresh crew featuring MC Ricky D. All right?
Got it.
So, he was never the focus. So now it's about him. And it's all about him. So this is why this is so important. And there's the A-side, Teenage Love, which is the chance to, this is what we give the radio. This is what we're going to make a video for, right? Def Jam. Mm-hmm. And we got them Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute because that's the song everybody knows. That's the song the tri-state area knows. That's the routine everybody knows. But it's different now. And also, we're cross-promoting the film, Tougher Than Leather.
Right.
All right? So that's crucial to understand. And that's why you have a filthy-ass song like this leading off an album, because it's what's familiar to the audience.
Got it. I see, and I was wondering when I heard this, I'm like, what made him start the album with this? And that also explains the here's an oldie, but because I always, like, the whole week I'm thinking, like, is it an oldie but goodie in, like, an ideological sense? Like, was this just, like, neighborhood wisdom that had been passed down and he's just putting it on record? Like, was this a phrase like treat her like a prostitute that was kicking around? But this officially like opens my, okay, so this was a known routine.
A literal oldie but goodie.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Wow. All right.
If you go on YouTube, you will find different live versions of it from either recorded in 85 or 86. And you'll see in the comments, I recorded this off the radio in 86. I recorded this in 87. I recorded this from Kiss in 87. I recorded this from 88. I heard this in 85. I was at the club. So
right.
So
that
again,
explains a lot for me too, Dart, in the construction of the beat, because I was noting that the beat, in relation to a lot of other beats on this album, you know, the last two excluded, it felt older than the rest of the production, but I guess they're trying to emulate the feel and the tempo of Dougie Fresh and the beatboxing.
Well, also the reason is because likely it was probably one of the first songs made for the project.
Got it.
And it might have been a demo originally, because there were a lot of demos during the process. This album had a very weird process, and there are songs that Slick Rick kind of wanted to do this album along with Vance Wright, but Def Jam brought on the Bomb Squad, and then there was tension. And it's funny because it ended up making the album great, but Slick Rick, you know, was so fucking up his own ass that. Now, back to what I was talking about before about my issues with Urban Legends, right? Read this album's release. So, going back and forth with them, I'm like, yo, but that's how I had explained to you the single, right? Because it's the timeline's important for the singles. And I'm like, first of all, the single for Teenage Love, Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, that shit was out in September before Tougher Than Leather dropped, in like September 15th or 16th, one of them. And back in the days, you know, like when a movie comes out, a big movie comes out, it's everywhere that Friday.
Yeah.
Well, when a black movie featuring a bunch of dudes from Queens who wear Adidas drops in Boston, the city that's known for gang violence and everybody wearing Adidas, they're gonna stagger that movie release, but they're not gonna do it for the single. So I'm like, I know for a fact that this first single came out in September, right? So if the first single's out in September, this album didn't drop November 1st, because likely that first single came out between September 9th and September 16th. So you're not going to put the album out, bam, November 1st. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And moreover, I know that this album did not drop in November because people were discovering this album was out during the Christmas holiday. So I researched and I found out that there was something released by Slick Rick on December 2nd, 1988. And I mistakenly thought it was the album. I was wrong. What it was, the album was actually released between December 13th and December 16th. Likely December 16th, that was a Friday, right?
Okay.
And it explains why the album doesn't appear on Billboard until January 7th, 1989. Because it had the entire Christmas holiday, and that you miss a week.
Right. Okay.
Of Billboards. The last week of Billboard, they don't print a chart, or they'll skip it. And so what happens is the album didn't debut until January 7th, 1989. So I'm talking to the people at Urban Legends, and I'm like, if this album was released November 1st, 1988, how come it doesn't debut on the Billboard charts? And here's the thing. I'm not talking about the top pop. That comes later, especially with black music, because they report early. It's a whole bunch of bullshit. Researcher talk. But I'm talking about the top black albums chart.
Right. Why would it debut 9 weeks after it debuted in stores? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Especially if it's Slick Rick, who is one of the biggest people on Def Jam. And Def Jam was probably the rap label that had the most clout and actually did the most promotions and did it the most effectively. So albums from Def Jam, unless it's like a lesser group, are not going to sit there and not enter the charts. They're just not, especially back then, because people saw a Def Jam logo and they went fucking bananas. So that's what I'm trying to explain to them. And I found archival pictures of the album release party, and everybody is wearing Christmas shit.
It got him in 4K.
Yeah.
Well, it might be 2K, but nevertheless.
Oh, yeah, it might have.
Yeah. 1.5K, because you had dot matrix printers back then.
Right, okay.
But I'm like, look, this is the record release party. Everybody's wearing Christmas shit. Why would they be wearing Christmas shit if this album was released 3 weeks before Thanksgiving 1988? And what I heard back was silence.
Right. Okay.
Because they were basically like, we already, putting the shit out. So it is what it is. And I was like, all right, cool. And it's funny because that was one of the first big jobs. That was one of the first big jobs that I got that paid me a significant amount of money writing. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, why can't it always be like this? But also, everybody who worked on that project realized this motherfucker knows everything. So that was fun. That was so fun.
Look, in trying to get the notes together for this episode, I found your Instagram post from 2018 about the December 2nd date.
Yes, which was wrong. Which
was wrong. So, I mean, this is an odyssey of information.
Yeah, because here's where it fucked me up, right? Because you have to go through multiple sources. You can't rely on just Billboard. You can't rely on Wikipedia ever. You can't rely on just Billboard. So I went to Cashbox. And Cashbox is funny because Cashbox, a lot of people don't know this. I'm going to tell you this now. I tweeted it. And I don't know, I have like 30,000 people who follow, but I don't know how closely they follow. So the thing about Cashbox that's important is that they were the first publication to have a rap chart, both for albums and singles. The album chart went to 10, the single chart went to 15. And this started summer 88, maybe like late May, early June 88. So they are early because the rap chart doesn't pop up on Billboard until I believe either February or March 1989. March 11th, 1989. That's the first rap chart in Billboard. So they were ahead of the curve. But the rap chart in Billboard goes up to 30. But it didn't expand. 30 was a lot to them, but it never expanded until too late. So it was wild. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because when you look at Billboard, the December 2nd issue of Billboard for 1988 has a review for Teenage Love Treated Like a Prostitute. They hated it. And in the December 16th, 1988 issue of Cashbox, or it's December 17th issue of Cashbox, December 17th issue of Cashbox, they review Slick Rick's new album. And they fucking hate it.
Wow.
Shit.
They think it's a mismatch. They think it's all over the place. They think it's schizophrenic. And they thought that Teenage Love was a horrible story that didn't go anywhere.
I disagree, but okay.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because this album is regarded as one of the all-time great rap albums in history. And Cashbox fucked it all up in black and white twice. And I'm reading it with my jaw agape. Matter of fact, you know what? Fuck it. I'll read the exact words. Okay. So in the December 17th, 1988 issue of Cashbox, I wish I knew what page this was because you can't find pagination. Slick Rick, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick, Def Jam, FC 40515, various producers. Slick Rick sets the tone of this rap album with Treat Her Like a Prostitute, then tries to play sensitive with the rap ballad Teenage Love, a goofy, slippery, and ultimately schizophrenic record. Okay?
Man.
And other feature picks, Skinny Boy, Skinny, they can't get enough, you know? So
okay. Oh man.
And then my God, they hated the single Teenage Love, so
Is it just the juxtaposition between the two records that bother them? Because that's all they're bringing up.
That's all they're bringing up because it's like, I don't know. I guess they didn't get it. But also, like, when I talk about Cashbox, it's funny, right? Because there are albums that they love and they champion for Cashbox, and then other albums they ignored. Like in 1988, they completely ignored the Jungle Brothers, Straight from the Jungle. They act like it didn't exist. It doesn't crack the black music albums charts, even though it's on the Billboard charts. It's weird. But the album that kind of replaces it is Super Lover C and Casanova Rudd's Girls I Got 'Em Locked, which is a great rap album from 1988, don't get me wrong. But to get that album and fawn over that album and completely ignore Jungle Brothers when they were both kind of in the same space and came out at the same time, it's just fucking weird.
Man.
Right, especially with hindsight, seeing, we still talk about the Jungle Brothers today. We obviously still talk about this album. This is one of the most influential rap albums of all time. It's always funny to see what, in hindsight, the reviewers were saying was actually better than the stuff that stood the test of time now.
I mean, they were really early on. This is the first publication to Cashbox to really give MC Hammer any props whatsoever, or to list his sales, because they have his shit on bustin'. Like, damn, like bustin'? That's before he even got on Capitol. Like, they're like, yo, he's moving units out here, bro. Like, it's crazy. But as far as the song "Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute," it's hilarious because this was a big song for my generation because it was filthy and nasty and raunchy, and it kind of harkened back to like the stories that like the Blue comedians told when we were kids on party records, but it was like in rap form. But like, this is how Slick Rick got his reputation as a storyteller. When you look at the album, right? The album is pretty much stories. Yeah. Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, Teenage Love, Children's Story, Kit, What's the Scoop, Indian Girl. Like, he's the storyteller. And that was the thing that really sold the album. And the thing that's crazy about this album too, like I just said, that it was released right around the Christmas holiday. So like, likely December 16th, 1988 is the release date because it was released on a Friday. I know that for sure. Columbia Def Jam used to release the albums on Fridays, especially the big albums. And the reason they did it is because it was a cheat code. It gave you extra sales days, so you appeared higher on the charts. So an album usually comes out, here's the trick too. The album usually comes out on Tuesday. So that means you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Those 4 days. Then you have Saturday, Sunday. So that's 5 days, right? Then you turn over. You need 10 full days of sales before you're eligible to enter the charts. Well, if you release your album on Friday, that means you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's 5. Then you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But now you still have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday sales before this thing. So you earned yourself 4 extra weeks. And what happens is they usually take a Def Jam release and they toggle it to another week. So they push it another week. And when they push it another week, it's going to enter the charts higher. And also, this is what's weird. Why would they do that? Well, because Def Jam is gaming the system. Because what everybody doesn't know, people who research and people who are like olds, who are outside, Billboard used to report black music sales first. What I mean by that is that they shortchanged them. So what that means is that, so if you report early, then that means that your album's going to enter the charts lower, if it enters at all. And with white music or pop or rock R&B, pop and rock on the top pop charts, they report last. So they get their full sales. So this is the trick. What you would do is, and here's the loophole. This is fucking weird too. This is the loophole. You can enter the top pop albums charts if you sell enough before you enter the black music charts. So a rap group like let's say what's the name of a group? A rap group that sells a lot. So you'd say like, and this is a rare occasion. So let's say Beastie Boys, right? Beastie Boys enter the top pop albums chart before they enter the top black music charts because they're rap. Because they sold so many units that they forgot to count them as a black album. Okay, is this fucking bananas? This would happen to like and this happens before the SoundScan era. So this is before 1991. So we're talking like the late 80s, right? So this could happen to a Run DMC. This could happen to LL Cool J. This could happen to a Public Enemy. Okay, but it's very rare. This will happen again. It could happen to a Run DMC, like Beastie Boys. It could happen to Houdini. But it's very rare that it happens. But it did happen to LL Cool J in 1989, because his album sold so much because it was released on a Friday that it entered the top pop albums before it entered the black music charts. And in order to clean it up, what they did was they entered LL Cool J's album in the top black albums really low, like at 98 or something stupid. And do you know what it was the next week?
What's that?
Number 1?
2.
Oh, close enough.
2.
Right.
I was like, wait, how did this fucking album jump 96 spots on the black music charts? But when you look at where it entered on the top pop albums, it's high. So you're like, wait, how's it high on the top pop charts and it's at 98 here? And it just shows the discrepancy between how they counted and how they did black music versus white music. It's really weird.
This drop goes out to Billboard.
Are you a racist?
Okay, we know about them. That's wild. That is nuts.
Okay, so if we're gonna talk about the actual song, "Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute," did it age well? Fuck no. It's the funny thing about "Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute" is that in 1988, it sounds like a song that was a routine in 85 and 86, right? Mm. But Slick Rick is charismatic enough to sell it, you know? But the thing is, the selling point of why this song leads off the album, because it's what's familiar. It's what we know. It's the sing-along song. Treat her like a prostitute. Do what? No, treat the girlie well. Treat the girlie well. You know? And then it's like, and like everybody knows the song. Well, here's what's funny. I say everybody, I'm using air quotes. You can't see me. I'm using air quotes because if you lived outside the tri-state area, or I didn't have family in the tri-state area, you never heard this fucking song before. So it's new to you. So when he says, it's an oldie but goodie, hit it, you're like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Right.
He's like, I know you from Lottie Dottie in the show. Like, this is one of your old songs? So the funny thing is that Tougher Than Leather, and this is the disconnect too, Tougher Than Leather, the film, did not, when I told you that they staggered the release because they were afraid of violence, because Negroes and Adidas and gang violence and rap and Adidas outfits, and especially in Boston where gang violence was very prevalent, and Adidas outfits. And Run DMC, it was like if Run DMC did a show in Boston, it was like a home show. And the Mazzels had family here. The Mazzels lived here, you know. So like a Run DMC show in Roxbury or Dorchester or South End or Mattapan, they might as well have been in Queens, right? Everybody came out. But the crazy thing is that the movie was not shown everywhere. You know, and they staggered it. They showed it in one theater here, one theater here, one theater here. You're going to have to drive to go see this shit, right?
Wow.
If you're anywhere near around Negroes, you know, like we're going to all hop on the train in our bombers and leather gooses and go to the white part of town to watch Tougher Than Leather. Okay. And then you go to the theater and you're like, this movie's too black and bad, right? So anyway, the reason why I mention that is because in the film, Slick Rick performs goddamn near the whole song. Like, it's weird. They have like almost a full performance, like, you know, Running D and talking some bullshit, and they cut to Slick Rick doing a whhole verse, and they're like, what? This makes no sense. And okay, so now this is something that only somebody who's old and was around will tell you. So again, the movie doesn't last in the theaters long because it's Tougher Than Leather. And it goes to video, VHS, rather quickly. And when you go to rent it from the VHS store, the video rental store, you pick it up and it's the box. You look at it, and then on the box it advertises Slick Rick is performing his song Treat Her Like a Prostitute in this movie. And you're like, that's a selling point?
Right.
And the reason it's a selling point is because Slick Rick is a fucking superstar by the time this VHS is released. Yeah.
Got it.
So here's what's crazy, right? This album is released again December 16th, 1988. By spring, summer 89, Slick Rick's album is battling De La Soul for the top spot on the top black albums chart. It's them 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. Like May, June 1989. And then like it's wild because an onslaught of albums come out in 1989. We're talking about fucking Heavy D and the Boys, LL Cool J. We're talking Boogie Down Productions, you know, like fucking EPMD. Everybody and their mother drops in summer 89. And one of the best-selling albums is still Slick Rick's album. Why? Because Children's Story is the hottest song out in summer 89. So
Got
can
it.
you understand like how fucking wild this is that this leads off the album? And when people talk about this album, they don't really talk about Treated Like a Prostitute unless they're talking about how it didn't age well and how it's kind of it's funny because it's not super clever. It's just kind of funny and filthy, you know? And Slick Rick does funny and filthy better later on in his career when he's not using 3-year-old, 4-year-old material.
Right.
So it's really funny, right? Because the reason why I wanted to like talk about this song to lay the foundation because there's so much backstory that if you're listening to this album without knowing it, you'll have no reason why this song is even on the album. Forget about leading it off.
Right. Yeah, this this fills in a lot of holes for me.
Just like the Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute song did.
Right. I'm gonna say this. This should go out to the people that Dart was working with, as well as Wikipedia for these release dates. Okay, Charlie Murphy has a message.
Wrong.
Okay, we know what really happened now. Okay, it was Christmas season when this came out.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, I learned something too when you were telling me about the Kango
It doesn't feel like a
Crew.
Christmas season album to me, though. I mean, some of the product, like in the percussion, that a little bit, but most of the time, musically, I'm feeling this is like a summer album to me.
And that's why it blew up in spring going into the summer.
Right.
Because it's the same thing that happened to in reverse to what's their name? Cypress Hill. Cypress Hill released their first album in August 1991. That shit did not move. I promise you, it was not moving. It didn't start moving until it got cold outside in the East Coast. And How I Can Just Kill a Man started blowing up. Because here's the thing about that. The lead single was Funky Feel One. The Funky Feel One. The B-side blew up. And when the B-side was blowing up, Billboard was so fucking scared to have a song called How I Could Just Kill a Man climbing the charts that they kept listing it as Funky Feel One.
Wow. Just outright. Just
Fear.
calling it something else. Wow. Okay.
Just fear. And I'm like, yo, how come they're listening to this Funky Feel One when there's clearly How I Could Just Kill a Man? That's the song that's being played on the radio.
Right.
That's the song, this video that's being played on your MTV Raps and Rap City and the box and everywhere else. That's the song everybody's going crazy over. You know? Like, y'all are full of shit. And the Billboard editor at the time made it a conscious decision to not list the name of that song. Right? So so the reverse happens with the Slick Rick album. It's released in the winter. I mean, the coldest months.
Yep.
We're talking December, January, February, and then March, the end of March. March Madness. And then it blows up April, May, June, July, August. Right? So it is a summer album. And it was proven. But also it's funny because it was released at the same time as some of the greatest summer albums ever made. Fucking Heavy D and the Boys Big Time is one of the greatest summer albums in rap history. And it sounded like it fit. And the shit was released 6 months ago. Is that bananas or what?
That's just a point too that I wish we could still experience in modern, in a modern era, because we got this thing that goes on now where an album gets released, and if it doesn't catch on within like a week, it's like lost to history. It feels like nobody talks about it anymore. Like we don't get the growers anymore. Like or so it feels like. You know, there used to be a time, I remember a time where an album could come out and it would stay in rotation. It would stay in the conversation for months at a time. You know, it could catch on later. It's like, if you don't get that first week sales, like, buzz about you.
A recent, well, not recent, but, 12 years ago, Marshburg by Rock Marciano. That was an album that through word of mouth continued to get, recommended and brought up in the end of the year. And, to Dart's point earlier about the reviewers back then, kind of skipping over this, you know, I think about someone like Rock Marciano, where you have your B Dots, who I don't think ever included him on one of their lists of the best MCs doing it at the moment, or if he did,
no, because
he
B
just
Dot's
got around to it.
B Dot is a fucking whore, dog.
Man.
All right, straight up. I've told him to his face, man. He's a fucking disgrace to this whole culture and art. Basically, it's sad because he was pretty much tapped as like the apprentice to Elliott Wilson, and I was like, let me tell you something. When you're real and you bring on somebody to be your second, your apprentice, or your acolyte, or what have you, you pick somebody you know that will surpass you.
Wow.
All right, you pick somebody that you know will surpass you, who will bring something new to the table, who will be somebody that will grow to a size where he or she has to remind everybody that you existed. All right, that's what happened with Ip Man and Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee told the world about Ip Man. You know what I'm saying? The reason they had Ip Man movies is because Bruce Lee kept talking about Ip Man. Think about that shit, right? Think about how many people were great teachers or great mentors, and they brought up somebody who surpassed them, and they bring up their name. That's how this shit's supposed to work. And when you think that you're great or good at what you do, you're going to bring somebody who's going to bring things to the next level. Elliott Wilson purposely picked somebody who is just a fucking yes man, who is just going to stir the pot. And that's what he was. He was a pot stirrer. He's somebody that gets people mad and agitates them. And because Elliott was like, yeah. But Elliott realized soon on, not too long afterwards, that B-Dot cannot stand up to scrutiny. And what happens is he gets approached by somebody and he gets shut down. And he has no response. And Elliott got to sit there like, oh shit. And I've seen Elliott do it again and again and again and again. Just watch this man get shut down. That's why nobody takes that motherfucker seriously. Yeah. So back in the days of Twitter, when I used to shut that little bitch down all the time, and he has no credibility whatsoever. Look at what I do. Look at what I do.
Yeah, dude. In comparison, it's like I've seen.
I fact check books. I've worked with archives. People that are respected, known motherfuckers, connected motherfuckers. They come to me. Right. Record. I get DM'd by artists and record labels like, yo, can you get to the bottom of when this dropped? You know what I'm saying? Independent artists are like, yo, I don't know when my own shit dropped. Can you find it for me? And I'm like, bam, here. All right? That's what I do. When people talk about like black music or art or culture or different things, they come to me. All the discussions I've been on, all the documentaries I worked on, I can't talk about because of NDAs, all the films I've been a part of, all the TV shows, all the different projects, I've seen a laundry list of names. The different colleges and universities I've spoken at, gave lectures for, and they've used my books, and all these things. I've never heard that fucking man's name, Brian, whatever the fuck his last name is. His name is never brought up, never, because he's nobody. Nobody respects that son of a bitch. He's just a name on the internet. And he's like using that fame that he got from being around Elliott Wilson. And by the same token, the same circles I run in, nobody calls Elliott. You know what I'm saying? So it is what it is. And the thing is that I had to realize early on that I couldn't be mad at that man for being popular on that space where I wasn't, because that's not what I do. This is what I do. I do the actual work. I get my hands
There's
dirty.
money in the paid sycophant work for sure, but
being a provocateur, whenever I see V-Dot's name mentioned, it's usually people quote unquote dunking on him because he said something outlandish.
Look, B-Dot is fucking, he's Sean Bradley out this bitch. He's Keith Kloss out this bitch. Right? He's that big target that people dunk on. He's fucking Frederick Weiss. Or Vice, however you pronounce it. Because he's French and no one gives a fuck. But like, once somebody jumps over your head and dunks in front of the whole world, nobody gives a fuck about you no more. And that's B-Dot.
Wow.
But I digress.
To that point,
need I remind people real quick? Jadakiss told y'all.
Todd Adams, are you official? I'll slap the shit out of anybody who says I ain't.
No,
all right.
You know,
that's a classic. But, to that point, it's the same critics and cultural commentators, quote unquote, who are delivering these hottest MC lists every single year, all this stuff. None of it is any real contribution. It doesn't last. There's no footnote in history where people could go back to and reference it. It's all all fleeting. But at the end of the day, you look at some of the offhanded, kind of completely out of the loop reviews and statements that people were making back then, and relate it to now, and it's like, oh man, those statements haven't aged well at all. This is to me like the 80s rap album, just for my tastes.
And the thing is that, like, again, to harken back to what I was talking about, I was actually one of the only people going to Elliot and B-Dot telling them that if y'all ain't including Marsburg on your list isn't valid. And then later on, I was like, if you're not talking about people like Ka, then you guys are just not doing the work at all. But moreover to this album, 1988 is easily one of the most, if not the most, especially this particular stretch, I've said it before, spring, summer 1988 is arguably the most intense and the most competitive era in any rap music era. I was alive in 96. I was 21, turned 21 summer 96. I turned 18 in 93. I was around for 94, 95, very aware. I was outside in 1986, 87, 88, 89. Okay? Right. 1988 is unfuckwittable. Okay? Now, that being said, 1989 was scary. But if we want to really get there, I think arguably a year that's even more competitive than 88, 89, maybe on the same level, is 1991. But 1991 is also we're in the pop rap era, so it's really weird, and everybody's really like angsty and shit. It's weird. Yeah. But this album coming to the tail end of 1988, entering 1989, is wild. Because the albums that did that were like, we're talking about albums like Ultramagnetic MC's Critical Beatdown that are also around this space. You know what I'm saying? Like the tail end of 88 into 89, it's spring, summer 89. This still sounds fresh compared to stuff that just dropped spring, summer 89, and it's still competing directly with it. And you have to think, this album was made 6 to 8 months ahead. And in rap, dude, 18 months changes everything. An album made in 1990 sounds dated by 1992. An album released in 1992 sounds dated by 1994. That's what happened to the Fugees' first album. Fugees' first album,
Blended on Reality?
Blended on Reality comes out, and it came out because it was delayed. So that album was pretty much trash, and the only thing that saved it was the singles, which were recent. So to harken back, an album that has been sitting for 6 to 8 months is still hot, while all the new shit's coming out. That's wild. And that's what Slick Rick's album did. And also Slick Rick's album also established a gold and platinum standard. Right? Like, it's a party record, but also there's so many stories. Like Kit, What's the Scoop? Mona Lisa. The whole fucking damn album is it's stories. Yeah. But if we're talking about this individual song that leads off the album, I usually give 10s because I'm picking a classic song. Right. In this instance, I'm going to give this one a 7. Because,
okay. Wow.
Because it's a 7 because this is not anywhere near on par with the classic material on the album, but it stands out because it's the introduction. I'm going to give you the familiar, and then we lead you into all the other hot shit. Like, when I compare this to something like Lick the Balls, a song that people used to fast forward to before they left their driveways because they wanted to drive down the street bumping that shit with the scratching in the bass. No. Yeah. Kid, What's the Scoop? Mona Lisa? Like, children's story? Hey Young World? This song doesn't fucking compare with like shit like Indie. None of it. So I give this a 7 because it's out of place on this album, but the reason it's here is because of all the reasons I explained. It is the familiar song, and it's the lead-in. And it's the routine people in the tri-state area knew. And if you lived outside the tri-state area, luckily I have family in New York and Connecticut, New Jersey, what have you, that I heard this song, in 87-ish, right? So when I hear Treat 'Em Like a Prostitute, it's not the first time I've heard it.
Right.
But for most people, this shit is really out of place. You understand? Like, why lead off with this?
Yeah. Yeah,
Why?
that was my thought. Yeah.
So yeah, that's my thoughts.
And now I know. Like it's man, wow. Like, this is what I'll be telling. This is exactly what I said up top. Like that was a huge history lesson. Like
this is why we bring in Dart, especially for these, 80s albums where we may have heard the songs, but we don't have any sort of recollection of the era.
Yeah. I mean, before I forget, he taught me something when he was talking about the Kango crew, because he said, I guess Dana Dane had an accent because he wanted to fit in with everybody else. And that made sense to me because I remember the first time I ever heard Dana Dane was my dad. He would always tell me about the song Cinderfella, and he finally played it for me. And I remember hearing, Cinderfella, Dana Dane, because I'm the rapper Dana Dane with fame. And I'm like, oh, he was rapping like that because he had to meet, kind of the characteristics of the crew, basically. I always thought like, oh, that was like his own sort of like style.
No.
But now I put two and two together. It's like, oh, Slick Rick got it. Like, wow. And I never knew that before.
Because if you're because Omega had an accent, he was Jamaican. Slick Rick had like a English accent, but he kind of accentuated it, but Dane was like, I can't be rapping next to these dudes in my regular voice. It fucks up the feng shui,
Right.
So he had to come up with his own style, right? And, and he had to do it in a way where it wasn't straining his voice. So it came very natural. Yeah. And the crazy thing about that is that, again, this album was released late 88, but what happens with Dana Dane is Dana Dane becomes a star before him. Dana Dane's album is released in 87, and it's a slow burn, his album Dana Dane with Fame. Dana Dane with Fame kind of goes gold just with black folks, and it kind of has like a year shelf life because of all the singles. Like, the first single to blow up was 86. You know what I'm saying? Delancey Street. You know what I'm saying? And then you get like, and it's crazy because like his DJ is Clark Kent, and he hooks up with Herbie Lovebug. So Dana Dane is part of like this superstar crew. You know what I'm saying? He got Kid. He's leading, like, he opened the door for Kid and Play. He opened the door. He kind of kicked the door open more for Salt and Pepper. Because Salt and Pepper's album comes out, they have to re-release that album before it really blows up. Like y'all, like, I don't know if people realize that. That album comes out to tail end of 86, early in 87, and they have to kick out the original Spinderella, replace her with a hot teenage girl, and then shoot a video for Push It, which is hot, and then put that video on all the markets, because Tramp, the video, when you watch the video for Tramp, right? They're wearing gear from the 86 NBA Finals.
Wow.
One of them's wearing a Rockets joint, and the other one's wearing a Celtics joint, to give you an idea of the time period. You know what I'm saying? And when they finally blow up, it's because Push It's out, because their aesthetic has changed, because now they got the hot girl Spinderella with them, and they take pictures with her. Spinderella was like 16, dog.
Wow.
Like,
that's crazy.
The group didn't blow up until after they got Spinderella. I promise you. And then they cut that woman out of everything. It's bullshit. It is bullshit. Let me tell you, dog, I was outside. When they got Spin, it was on and popping. All of a sudden, the singles are fucking hitting the charts. The posters are selling. They're on tour. Everybody's like, "Ooh, look at her with the sideways haircut," not realizing that she had to cut her hair that way because her hair got fucked up when she tried to get it dyed. You know what I'm saying? Man. But it is what it is. The asymmetrical haircut comes in and it's popping. Phoebe Cates makes it look hot. It's what it is. You know, wow. But yeah, man, it's wild. But Slick Rick becomes a star off of this record. like a star, like a star, a black music star. And what's crazy is like he starts ending up on R&B remixes because rap music was pushed to the margins. So you got people like Al B. Sure, the light skinned dude with the long eyebrows that connect that everybody loves, and they're putting Slick Rick on remixes. They're like, oh wow, we like this man. We're gonna allow him on TV. They let Slick Rick perform with Al B. Sure on TV. The light skinned prince himself. Oh shit, it's dope. Let's get it.
Man, like, so I feel a little better about my rating now because now that I know, like, okay, it was an older record, and apparently everyone else agrees that like it didn't really age all that well. But there's something interesting though as far as how it's aged. So my rating on this one, and before I announce it, I do want to say they're only gonna be.
Oh my God, here we go.
No, I'm just saying, like, this is my favorite. I think this is my highest rated 80s album too. There's gonna be a 9 on here for me, but this is one of only a couple skips for me. It's 6+. But this is why, and this is really the only reason why, because what I appreciate about the record is the setups from verse to verse, the thought and the progression of the song. You see how it ends with the zinger of like, it ends with him on top, basically, no pun intended. Like he's banging the dude's chick, But what it comes down to is like me being idealist male, I guess. I just prefer to hope for the best in people. And it's like, I get the tale of just basically being careful with who you interact with and who you put the eggs in the basket of, so to speak. But it's like, yeah, nowadays this would probably qualify as like incel music a little bit. Like, and yeah, it's wild to start the album with this, but it's really just the sentiment itself that I don't mess with because the humor is there. It's funny. Yeah. It's well constructed. I think what this reminds me of, and I think this is a better version of this song, when we did Dear Yvette, I had the same sort of feelings, but Dear Yvette feels meaner than this song. Like this is like, at least he's admitting why he's coming across this way. Up top, when he says there's girlies out there that seem appealing, but they all come in your life and cold hurt your feelings. Right there, he's telling you he doesn't want his feelings hurt. That's what this is about. You don't want your feelings hurt. There's a lot in that admission there.
Right, and because in the chorus, he's saying, or, the refrain, treat her like a prostitute. Don't treat no girly well until you're sure of the scoop. As in, basically...
Not don't treat her well ever.
Right, but don't treat her well until you know that she's not going to hurt you.
Right. And I mean, to that respect, it's like, okay, I mean, yeah.
Also,
like,
who knows how different people treat prostitutes differently. I mean, some people could be rough with them. Some people could treat them with the utmost respect. So, listen, I'm not here to litigate that necessarily. I'm here to give the song a 7-. I'm in between you guys.
Okay, got it.
On this one. The first time I ever heard the line itself was on Marshall Mathers' LP by Exhibit. We heard it last week on Bitch Please.
Mm-hmm. But rappers getting treated like a prostitute. Check the sound scan.
So from there, the first time I heard this album was like 03, 04. So I knew that line from that record. And it's not a sentiment that I necessarily agree with, but I'm not viscerally offended by it, and it's because of the lightheartedness of the record. And
yeah, I mean,
it's a 7- because to me, production-wise, it feels like a step back from a lot of the other production on this album. And it makes sense when Dart was saying, this is an older record. It's probably recorded, or one of the first records recorded for this album. The refrain of treat her like a prostitute doesn't do a whole lot for me. The beat, I'm not in love with it. But Slick Rick, man, I mean, on this record, even within the different verses when he's going into his sort of musings on, the women and the relationships, and like you said, him coming out on top in the end and everything like that, it all just feels like a decent enough setup for what we're going to be getting going forward. Lighthearted, sense of humor, doing other people's voices. I love the I love you, Harold. or I love you, Harold.
And
Now, what's funny-
Your name is Will.
Now, it's funny when you go on YouTube and you go looking for the version that he does with Dougie Fresh. Dougie Fresh does that voice.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Nice.
Okay. So I think I might end up preferring the live versions of this because the beat and like the scratching on here isn't phenomenal. I do like the 1, 2, 3 before the third verse. That kind of made it sound a little bit cleaner to me. But you know, there's better scratching later on you know, Let's Get Crazy, for example, that feels like more in line with the beat.
Well, also because Let's Get Crazy was produced by the Bomb Squad.
Okay. That makes sense. So, yeah, I like this one, but it's really Rick carrying the song for me. It's a somewhat questionable record in sentiment, but the actual execution is what got it over. It's Rick doing what he does best and making me stomach something that another artist probably wouldn't be able to do.
You know, I definitely feel sort of vindicated when you talk about hearing what Dart said and hearing that you also pointed out, like, yeah, the scratching it doesn't like really cleanly go into the beat, you know, as much as
we were having a bit of
but
a scratching discussion recently on the Resurrection review, and I was talking about how fantastic all of the scratching is on there.
Well, there's a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, this is it's a little sloppier here, but I wrote on the other end, it almost gives it a sort of live feel, like, and I wrote this before I even, you know, before Dart even said this, like it felt like sort of like an interlude in a live show, like this would be a routine somebody would do. So Definitely. Then hearing this, it's like, oh wow, okay, well there it is, you know.
Yeah, it does give a certain rawness to it that feels somewhat live in the studio recording.
Yeah, you know. And yeah, you know, the raunchiness of it, it's funny, like the part with the mailman, and you know, like that's exactly what I'm saying.
The way he emphasizes the word dick when he says the mailman's dick way up your wife's throat.
You know, like I'm sure that was probably like, you know, my eyes would bug out of my head if I heard that back then. It's like, yo, that was.
And wow, imagine seeing the routine live and not having any preparation for it, just seeing something like that.
When you hear the live version and hear the crowd's reaction to certain points, that's the hilarious part too.
Right, you know, like it's a well constructed record. Like I have no issue with the rapping. Like, I even got used to the scratching once I felt like, okay, it actually lends itself to that live sort of, you know, performance feeling. Yeah, it's just the sentiment I wouldn't agree with. I mean, like, but at the same time, I know where he's coming from because we've all had experiences like that where we had to learn that lesson. It's like, I should have vetted this person, you know, first. Like, so yeah, I mean, you could look at it like, oh, this isn't great advice. Like, you know, this guy is just hurt and he's taking these isolated incidents. Or you could look at it for what it is. It's like, look, it's a story, you know, and it's a well-constructed story and his points are made. And yeah, it's just like me personally, I wouldn't never feel the need to, you know, listen to this for any sort of actual advice. But in terms of, you know, as a piece of music, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it to me.
I think the word prostitute can be visceral for some people to hear for some reason.
Well,
I mean, especially in an age now where it's like sex workers is what we call them.
Yeah, we don't call them prostitutes in 2022 anymore.
Right. You know,
it's not hookers at the point era on HBO anymore. You know?
Right. You know, but yeah, I mean, I would even say I wouldn't be surprised if one day this went up to a 7 for me because I was not put off by any of the actual talk because I understand this is the concept of the song, you know. But
right. I mean, Mel, you like Bitches and Sisters from Jay-Z, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
this is true.
They're treading in similar intellectual waters, I feel like.
Yeah, basically. You know, there's always the, like, be careful because women can be hoes.
But
like,
not all women. We want to
hip-hop.
vet them to make sure they're women and not hoes, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's...
But we get to be hoes all day.
Right. So that's the double standard, you know? It's... Yeah, I mean, I just hang on to things like, you know, I think it's a conscious decision to say, don't treat no girly well until, I feel like a lot of in comparison to modern music, you don't even hear the idea that you can treat them well. Like not to pick on this guy because I'm a fan of this guy, but like Future, I don't think those two sentiments would be in the same song. He would just outright be like, fuck these hoes. But not like, yeah, just...
You could play a Future song for me right now and I wouldn't know it. Like if Future was in my backyard right now, I wouldn't lift up the shade. So it's just wild.
It's that sort of thing. The only other thing
that's
I had
Dart
to say
Adams'
about...
Days of Futures Past.
Wow, that was nice. I got that. The only other thing I would say is I had to really listen closely because the first couple of times I heard the song, I thought he was saying, don't treat no girly well until you show her the suit, like the birthday suit. Like that's what I thought he was saying.
Okay.
What he's actually saying is, don't treat no girly well until you're sure she's the scoop.
Oh, until you're sure she's the scoop. Okay.
Yeah.
Because Genius is until you're sure of the scoops. Okay, until you're sure she's the scoop.
But that's the problem with Genius.
Right.
I fact checked at this point 4 different books where the author got the lyrics from Genius and I had to correct the shit. All right? 4.
The craziest shit is you telling us that an actual record label who was, they have the rights to release this album, don't know when this album actually came out. Don't even know when it was.
Look, because the information they got from Def Jam was wrong. I've told Def Jam on multiple occasions that they had the wrong information for their own release. And I could prove it. And I could prove it because I pulled up. Articles and stuff like that from people that got it directly from Bill Adler. And I'm like, I don't know where you're getting that information from and then when you look at the charts, regional charts, and all these other sales reports, it tells you when a joint dropped. It tells you what's new. And I'm like, if it says this is new on this date, there's no way it was released 3 weeks later.
Right.
Because it's not a promo. You're not going to get a promo in fucking Nebraska.
We know what happened over at Def Jam. Mel, play the Russell Simmons drop. This is what happened when Russell Simmons got word of Dart's findings.
You talking about?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I guess he didn't want to deal with it, so he just said,
"Thanks for coming out. God bless you. Good night."
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to think if they hadn't even come to Dart, they wouldn't have known.
But no, dog. Seriously, there's been occasions where DJ Premier has posted, "This is the anniversary of the first Gangsta album." Like the Gangsta album's already out, and I send them a picture, and I'm like, "It was already out, dog."
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Here's an ad in Billboard. The very first chart for rap was in the March 11th, 1989 issue of Billboard. If you go to that issue of Billboard, right above it is an ad for No More Mr. Nice Guy, saying it's already out. So this album was out already in early 89. And also, we know that the album was rushed. It was a rush job. They went to the studio for like less than 2 weeks to put that fucking album together, and they rushed the album out. That's why they feel like their second album was really their first album, because they actually had the opportunity to work. So it's wild because like I do this all the time. Like I've just proven that De La Soul's album was not released in March for the 4th time. So like it's like it was funny because on an episode of Questlove Supreme, the first episode with Monica Lynch, Questlove says when Monica says that the album was released in March, Questlove immediately says, "Oh, this drives Dart Adams crazy whenever people say the album was released in March." He says, "Yo, this man is angry every time somebody says the album is released in March because this motherfucker has charts and graphs and Venn diagrams proving that it isn't." And I was late to that episode and people hit me. I was like, "Yo, Quest shouting you out on a new episode of Questlove Supreme." I was like, "Who's the guest?" And he said, "Monica Lynch." I was like, oh, "Okay, I know why."
We need to find that drop.
Okay. Well, I'll send you the audio. I got it.
Oh, nice.
Please do.
But what's hilarious, what's really hilarious about it is that she's like, well, maybe he got the information wrong. And I tweeted after it, I was like, I got the information directly from her. Because me and Dante Ross had a discussion. And then what happened is we were both on Instagram, and Dante says, yo, Monica, this dude says that the album had to come out at a different time. And she was like, well, and she has all the stuff. She was like, well, I'll go check. She goes to check. She's like, well, it looks like it shipped February 6th or 7th. I was like, oh shit, so that's the date. And that's the date that I said. That's the date that I was saying. And he was like, I don't know where he got the information from. So I found the tweet and I linked it to them both. I was like, here's the proof. So, and everybody was dying laughing. It's like, this motherfucker always has the receipts. And I always will, goddammit.
I gotta retire one of my old nicknames and bestow it to Dart, Mel.
Oh, which one is that?
The man with hip hop on his back.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, for sure. He's earned that.
All right,
Without
Dart
question.
has his first rap nickname. He's the man with hip hop on his back, unquestionably. Okay? Unquestionably. That's why we bring him on to do any album from the 80s. And I did want to ask Dart, because I was talking to Mel about this. I was saying I'm more likely to rate an album from 87, 88, or 89 higher than an album from 90, 91, or 92. Why do you think that is?
Well, because there's a feeling around these certain albums that this is breaking new ground.
Right.
And that was what I suspected.
There's a feeling when you listen to an album like Criminal Minded, you could tell that this is the fucking blueprint, no pun intended, for a lot of albums that came after it. When you listen to It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, or when you listen to Paid in Full, which is the release date July 7th, 1987. When you listen to these albums, you know this is the album that started a whole nother wave of rap albums, classic rap albums that came after it. Like a lot of classic rap albums of 88 and 89 don't exist without these albums from here. And a lot of rap albums that came out in 90, 91, 92 were, you know, predicated on people hearing rap albums from classic albums from 88 and 89. So that's why that feeling is. You know, it's not necessarily the same with rap albums from 84, 85, because it's before the sampling era.
Right.
So the beats and the aesthetic is so fucking different. But between...
Yeah, there was like a renaissance that would happen. Yeah.
86 is kind of that renaissance, right? Because 86, they're figuring it out. By 87 to 89, we're in it. It's happening. Yeah. And all these advances and all these quantum leaps are being made. Albums that made in 87, are released in 87, don't sound exactly like the albums released in 88 or the albums released in 89. You listen to the album in 89 versus the album in 91 when you get into the pop rap shit, and you're like, damn, I wish this album in 91 sounded more like this album in 89. You know, it's weird. But then, like, it shifts again between 92 and 96, where an album that dropped in 1991, you listen to that shit in 94 and it sounds dated. Whereas, like, you hear an album you had an album you loved in 85, you listen to that shit in 88 and it sounds kind of dated. You know, it's this weird shift. But 87 to 89 is that sweet spot. Like, there's a lot of albums that you could play forever from that stretch. And the same thing with, like, the golden era, the second golden era, 92 to 96. Like, you can pull up an album from 94 and play that shit forever.
Yeah, it's somewhere in, like, 93 where I'm just... And that's probably because that's when I first really got engaged with the music in real time. So I have that connection to it. I remember watching, you know, MTV and BET and VH1 at the time and starting to see rap videos played more and more in the mix, you know, and that was kind of the beginning, I would say, of my, you know, coming of age just in understanding this music at all. But there's something special about these late 80s albums for sure. And this album very much in particular. Dart, I have to thank you again for coming on with us. And do you have any plugs, any shout outs? The floor is yours.
Okay, so you guys already mentioned that my album, my album, god damn. The book I co-authored, Instead They Became Evil, with Sleeman, It's been pushed back. Thanks, BAT subvariant of the COVID, to August 9th, 2022. That book's coming out. But also there's a book that I helped to fact check. Well, I helped to fact check. I fact checked shit. By Jonathan Abrams. It's called The Come Up, An Oral History of the Rise of Hip Hop. It's coming out October 18th, 2022. It is, what's the word? The best word I could use to describe that book. Exhaustively researched. Exhaustively. I spent a good amount of time going over this book with a fine-tooth comb. I found a lot of things that were missing, added a lot of stuff to it. It was incredible process to work with this one. I'm like, yo, could you ask this person about this person in this year? Could you talk more about this person? Could you, in this city, there were other rappers that were around the same time. They didn't get mentioned. There was a particular part where, they focused on this one dude. I was like, there are two other people that were before him. So I don't want it to feel like he's going to jump the gun and say I was ahead of all these things, when the fact of the matter is, if we're going to do an oral history of this shit and get it right, you got to talk to these other people that were around before he was, because I don't want this motherfucker taking credit. It's funny because after the book comes out, y'all going to realize exactly who I'm talking about. But yeah, so those are the things I have right now. And I'm in a couple of documentaries and working on some TV stuff that, again, NDAs and what have you. By 2023, it'll become very clear. Wow, it's almost July. It's going to be July. So by 2023, it's going to be clear. It's like, oh, that's what he was talking about back then. It's funny, man. When you work in this industry, you live in the future. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
And the past and the present.
Yeah. Also, another book that I was a manuscript that I read early and I kind of gave feedback about is Psalm 1's Her Word is Bond. That book is out. It's an amazing book. It goes through some. I've read a lot of rap books, and this book talks about what it's like to be a woman who ain't necessarily straight, who's an underground rapper, who's pushed the margins in 4 or 5 different ways, and combating that both as a person, internally, externally, emotionally, and what this shit does to your psyche and your mental health, and how to navigate it. And when you're in uncharted waters, what it's like. You have to figure this shit out, because this someone, again, independent rap artist, came up post the hip hop underground boom and was in the internet era. So this is the Bandcamp, SoundCloud era, right? And she got to figure it out without a label and try to get above the noise. So there aren't that many rap books like this. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times people tell stories about the 90s and the zeros and the 80s and shit. The landscape was completely different. And so they're speaking reflectively about shit that happened when they were in their 20s and 30s. She's talking about shit that just happened recently that she was tweeting about. You know what I'm saying? So it's very different.
Yeah.
So that's a book that I would encourage people to buy. It's doing well, but I like to see independent books about that type of thing do well, because my book is also about a person from the MENA, Middle Eastern, he's a Palestinian community. And when you read books about Palestinians and people from the MENA community, they're one note. They're always about the same immigrant experience and everything else. And we're not going to get different books unless these books do well. And one of the things that happens is, key thing, comp titles. Anytime I pitch something, anytime I come up with something, people ask for comp titles. That means comparable titles. And if those comp titles don't exist, or they haven't done well, and there's no track record that people go out and buy and they support this shit, it never sees the light of day. So I pretty much have to extort somebody famous and rich to get the funding to make it. And then it's all right, hope that this distribution, makes it so that it's viable now, But it's wild. It's wild. So it's important to support these things.
Yeah, guys, support these books. And, these are different perspectives we're not hearing all the time. There's many, many rap books, as Dart said. But,
yeah, so many.
Let's support some narratives from different perspectives here. And, of course, let's support Dart and all of his efforts. He's such a great addition to the show. We love to have him. And Dart, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Yo, it's Mel from Rap Rankings. To hear the full episode this clip comes from and all the other episodes, stop by raprankings.com or search Rap Rankings on your favorite podcast platform.